Call it a form, a survey, or an audit. This type of application has to be one of the most common use cases of Canvas apps. Often the data is stored in the usual data sources, Dataverse or SharePoint. But what if your data has to be stored somewhere else? How do we leverage the application then? Hi, I'm Bruno and welcome to the Power Minutes. This challenge came to us from a customer who wanted a dynamic survey to be filled in the Canvas app, but the data source had to be reached out via API. To make matters worse, they didn't have the budget to create a custom connector, which would enable us to apply the required features to the custom connector and then be used on the Canvas app. So we have two challenges to tackle this time. They want a dynamic survey, meaning we cannot hard code the survey. So we have really to request that survey template before it will be filled in. Number two, we cannot or we don't have access to a connector, so we'll have to use a simple API to reach out via HTTP request, be it to request or submit data. Well, I cannot show the API myself. I've put a step over here to reference where it would be. This very step was over here is just to show you that then we extracted the data and converted into a JSON. For our example, I've hard-coded some generic quality of service questions. Did you find us useful? How could we improve? And how did you hear about us? Alongside some question types that will be used to provide the right type of answers. Then, of course, we'll be sending this information to Power Apps, in this case, as a string. Remember, we cannot use objects themselves very easily, so we first need to send it as a string. Then, on the Canvas app, if we go to the Start Survey screen, you will see how we leverage that information. First of all, we're doing some traditional clear information to ensure that we always start with a blank slate, and then we're collecting these questions. But how are we collecting these questions? First of all, you can see the flow over here. We are collecting the survey data output already, and we're using the parse JSON step to ensure that it's converted into a JSON. Now that we converted the string into a JSON, we decided to also ensure that the object is structured as we had it from our flow. We added the ID, the question type, and the choices, and for each step we used the right kind of function. So in ID, we used the value, question and question type, we use text, and for question choices, we use the table functions to enforce and let the application know that we are using this specific types of fields. So let's press the start survey and see what we get over here. And okay, looks like we got our data set. Of course, we used a gallery to display that data, but after that, we had the other challenges, is making sure that these fields show dynamically depending on the field type, or in this case, the question type. While the data might be dynamic, we still need to prepare each specific control for each question type. So we have 3 to tackle today. As you can see, we have the radio button for the Boolean field, the yes and no's, the text field, very obviously used for the text question, and then last but not least, a drop down for the choice. So overall, the action is actually pretty straightforward. We just decided to group these so we don't lose them as we develop. But let's check the radio button, and you'll see that on the visible, we have this item question type equals Boolean, meaning for each field, we will check and only show the right field. For text and the remaining field that is dropped down, you'll see that they have a similar sort of code. Great, but we have another configuration to do, the choices. So on the drop-down field, we ensure that the items is equals this item dot question choices. So if we briefly put it in play mode, you'll see that we are able to fill this in our minutes. And you'll see that the drop-down is over here ready to be filled in. So once all of the data is filled in, we are ready to submit our answers. You saw that it stopped being grayed out. Time to submit our data in to the system. Of course, we just need to press the submit button and ta-da, it's done. But what did we do under the hood? Well, let's do it back again and you will see, I can just prepare the data once more. If I stop the play mode and I click on the button, you'll see that we're doing the same actions, but in reverse. Now, this might seem a lot familiar as well for those that have been following us for a while. We will be sending this information straight back to Flow or Power Automate in this case. So what we're doing is we're collecting again all the survey answers through a for all. Once again, this is performed because we are collecting all of this information locally. We're not using connectors, so the for all loops are actually performant this time around. And over here, we also implemented a switch case to collect the information, or in this case, the answer, specifically based on the question type. So the system or the code will know where to get the answer from depending on the question type. Of course, once that is all collected in our collection, we will convert it with a JSON in this case, and then send it back to the flow. If you've been following us, you've seen this trick before, but let's just wrap it up. We're almost there. Let's check how we built the flow just so we can make sure that you get everything you need. It's pretty familiar to the first flow. We got our Power Apps trigger where our JSON was converted into a string or passed as a string. And now we need to have this compose step. We left this compose step during the development. This is where we use to copy and paste the value into our JSON schema on our parse JSON step. So we used it to paste it over here to generate the schema. Of course, we also put the scope step over here to remind you that's where you would put your API steps so we can finish the flow. And there you have it, a way to dynamically create and submit surveys while you don't have the traditional way of using the data sources. And when they're not an option, well, APIs and HTTP requests are there to save the day. See you next time.